Bring the context into that, because this is a really tough week for the president.
Yeah.
The president loses a big fight in trade on Capitol Hill. And she's running for president, and she's been very vague. She says, you know, trade can be good, it can be bad, I need to see the details. Right. The president is sending more advisors into Iraq, and you have Charlie Rangel saying, that's how Vietnam started. Yeah. I assume if you're Hillary Clinton, and you remember 2008, number one, you have people pushing her to be clear what you think about trade, a big economic issue. But number two, do you really want to be starting to wander through Iowa when one of the big debates in the country is, how many troops should we put in Iraq?
No, exactly. Look, in some ways, this is a State of the Union address, right? I mean, she was checking the box on all these different issues, and what she left out is just as interesting, right? She does not want to wade into the biggest fight right now among Democrats, which is basically, what do we do about economics? Where do we stand on trade? Her husband pushed through NAFTA, the last big trade agreement in the 1990s. 100 Democrats voted for it at the time. On Friday, only 28 Democrats voted for President Obama, actually more, frankly, than some people even expected. Still lost because they didn't pass the whole thing. And she has said nothing, basically, about where she stands on that at this point. And, you know, she's going to take some hits for that, but she feels like the damage of wading into that is even more, more risky.
I think what unifies Democrats now is culture. And I think that's why you saw her so aggressive on those issues, because that's what unifies them. And with, you know, it's what squeezes the other side. It's a huge sea change in American politics. They're the ones using culture as a cudgel against the GOP. It was always the opposite. The party is much more divided when it comes to economics and when it comes to foreign policy. And I think that's why you saw her sort of downplay the issue.
And if the president is losing, once a president starts to lose and the lame duck conversation starts in Washington, go back to 2006 and George W. Bush, once you get to the point, then your party's disagreements, which if you have a president, sometimes you can keep the genie trapped in the bottle. Once your party thinks you're a lame duck, whoosh. Yeah. So if Democrats are going to be out there, and you got Bernie Sanders saying, come on, Secretary Clinton, what do you think about trade? You know Bernie Sanders, Martin O'Malley, and Lincoln Chafee are going to be running around Iowa saying, we don't need troops in Iraq. Get out of Iraq. How much does that complicate where the president stands now and his struggles, assuming he can't get his own party back? How does that affect her?
Well, I think you're seeing partly, you know, President Obama reaping what he's sown with Congress, or failing to reap what he failed to sow, right? The fact that he's never been close to Democrats in Congress and never cultivated those relationships, which Democrats have been complaining about for, what, 6, 7 years now, but which is true.
Democrats even sometimes more than the Republicans, that the president hasn't tried.
So there's a remarkable lack of beholdenness, lack of loyalty to the president that they feel, because they don't feel that he's been there with them. And I think you're going to hear from Hillary, a part of her argument that hasn't gotten as much attention is her argument that she can make Washington work again. Because in order to get any of these things done, she's going to have a Republican Congress almost inevitably. And she's tried to make a case that subtly criticizes Obama, saying she's the one who can get people to work together in a way that he hasn't. And so, you know, that becomes a harder case to make. The more you see these divisions, the more you see that the president can't even get his own party on board, much less get anything done with Republicans.
She's also describing an America that we don't want right now, right? This America shouldn't be this, it should be that. It shouldn't be this, it should be that. That's what a non-incumbent tends to do, or a non-incumbent party tends to do. And in some ways, she's running against Obama's America, right? We're a country of inequality, we're a country of screwed up campaign finance, and there's an implicit critique in there as well. Much like John McCain in 2008 runs an ad saying we're worse off than we were 4 years ago, even though it was a Republican administration, in effect trying to distance himself and saying, I can be a change agent.
Yeah, and can she get away with that is the question, in the sense that if it's going to anger the White House when she says things like that, but they sort of already accepted her as the incumbent.
They're very mad. They're mad. They're mad at her,
they get mad when she says this, but can Bernie Sanders, Martin O'Malley, or Lincoln Chafee, or anybody else take enough advantage of that, not to draw a crowd in Iowa, but to draw the votes in Iowa and New Hampshire to actually knock her off?
They need to. I mean, that is what they are there for. They are there to move her to the left, because otherwise she has no reason to move to the left. She is a centrist
But moving her to the left and beating her are two different things.
Very true. No, it's very true. It's how much enthusiasm they can whip up from that liberal base to get them out to vote for them, and that is the question of whether they can really harness that anger.
And the best thing that's happened to Hillary Clinton is the fact that both Bernie Sanders and Martin O'Malley are running it, because if you assume that there's a sort of ceiling of anybody but Clinton Democratic primary voters, well, if those are split between 2 or 3 different candidates, that's great news for the Clinton folks.